everybody. This is Carolina Millan. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Hustle. And today we have a very special guest, somebody that I've been following and learning from for several years, Mr. Perry Marshall. He's the author of the 80-20 Rule. And it's not just a book anymore. We're going to be talking about that. I'm very excited to hear more. And Perry, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to me.
I'm glad to be here. And, people out there are trying very hard to make digital businesses work and get their families to work and get the chaos sorted out. So let's help some people make some big progress in their life. Let's do that.
Yes, I love that. I love that. So let's start talking about that. Maybe sum up. I know it's probably hard to sum up, but for the few people that maybe are listening to you for the first time, where you come from, how you got started with what you do today.
Well, I am the guy who was an engineer who got laid off from my job when my wife was 3 months pregnant with our first child. And I ended up going into sales. And I thought, well, this shouldn't be very hard. Well, it was quite a bit harder than I imagined. And after about 2 years of bologna sandwiches and ramen soup, I got fired from that job. And by the time, how you can see it coming.
Yeah.
Like you're just waiting to get called into somebody at the office because all this stuff isn't working. And I started having a lot of time to think about, okay, so what went wrong here? What's wrong with this job? Why didn't this work? Why am I not making more commission money? What kind of job should I be in? And the first thing I realized was it just was not a fit. And now I have much more sophisticated language to identify this problem now than I ever had back then. Okay. And now what I did back then, which really did help. So there had been my church had done this retreat, and we had they had bought this tool from somewhere, and it was about giftedness and what you're good at and all this kind of stuff. It was very well put together, actually. And we went through this whole thing. We wrote these things in these notebooks. And this had been a couple years before. And I had looked at all that because it said, well, you should be doing this and you should be doing this. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. I want to do these other things. And I just stuck it on the shelf and ignored it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm in this job, and our credit card debt is up to here. And I've got a 1.5-year-old baby. I've got a wife that's trying to stay home. Our cars are breaking down. We're going deeper every month, and I'm about to lose my job. And I am scared. And I got out that notebook and I started looking at it. And I'm like, maybe I should take this seriously.
Mm.
Well, that was exactly right. Okay. And one of the results of this, now it's 20 years later, and I have worked with thousands of salespeople. I've consulted in 300 industries. And what I noticed was there was a bunch of distinctly different kinds of sales and marketing people. Okay. So there's hostage negotiators. Okay. And these are people, they talk fast, and you throw them in a situation, they're just in the moment, and they don't even remember what they said, after they left, and they can't tell you what they did, but they got the deal, or they got the hostages out, or whatever. Right. And then there's another kind of person who, it's a copywriter, and he sits in his cave for 3.5 months, and he writes 117 emails and a 46-page sales letter. And when it's all ready to go, he presses send, and all this money shows up, right?
Yeah.
And okay, now, and here's the thing. If you try to get the hostage negotiator to do that, he goes splat. And if you try to get the copywriter to go hostage negotiate, he goes splat, right? And it's almost like people think that there's this like ideal marketer or there's this ideal salesperson. No. I have watched thousands of salespeople and they sell differently. And what's good advice for one is bad advice for another. This caused me to create a tool called the Marketing DNA Test.
Mm-hmm.
And it tells you if you're a hostage negotiator, and it tells you if you're the copywriter who hides in a cave with no lights for 3 months and eats pizza in RC and like never sees sunlight, right? And I mean, there's a bunch of different kinds. I mean, I just give you 2 today, but like one of the absolute most important things is whoever you are, and it's at marketingdnatest.com, and the book 80/20 Sales and Marketing actually has a back door into the test so that you can not spend as much money. But you have a marketing DNA, whoever you are, including you, Carolina. And so first of all, if all you do is strengthen your weaknesses, you'll have a bunch of strong weaknesses.
Yeah.
Okay. You strengthen your strengths. Okay. And what that means is if you're already a pretty good writer, then the best thing you could invest your money in is being a better writer. If you're a great writer, the best thing you can spend your money on is being an even better, more kick-ass writer, right? And the same is true if you're like a video or like whatever, a professional speaker. Okay. Secondly, you need to pick like what if it's your a job or a gig, a consulting gig, or a business, or you are an entrepreneur and you are a business and you're like, well, do I do Facebook? Do I do YouTube? Do I go out on the speaking circuit? Do I do podcasts? What do I do? The marketing DNA answers the question. Okay, that's what you should do. It's like some people should be sending emails, and some people should be writing books, and some people should be doing live webinars, and some people should be like on Skype or Zoom or on the phone, like closing deals.
Yeah.
They're completely different, right? And then the third stage is once you figure out what your groove is and you dial it in, then when you get a little bigger, you need team members with other skill sets so that you're not just in one medium. But my number one advice to any salesperson or any marketer, and this is right out of 80/20 Sales and Marketing, is you need to get good at one form of traffic and one form of conversion.
Yeah.
Before you do anything else, right? So how many forms of traffic are there? I mean, we have them coming out our ears. There's Instagram and there's Pinterest and there's Amazon and like there's all these forms of traffic, right? And then there's all these forms of conversion. Well, you could close them on the phone. You could send them an email. They could read a sales letter. You could do a video sales letter. Okay, get good at one of these and one of those and hook them together and get them working. And then worry about all of these other things. But most people, they are trying to do too many things,
yeah,
and it's killing you. And it's like it's the worst of everything. You're doing 9 million things and none of them are working, and you're beating yourself up and you're feeling terrible and your spouse is disappointed in you and your parents are like, what did I give birth to? And why can't she just like get a job? It's like, wait,
exactly.
Okay, mom and dad, you don't understand. Like I would jump off of a building if you made me do that.
Yeah, that sounds very relatable actually for me. When I first quit my job, my parents were like, "Why don't you get another job?" I'm like, "I don't need another job. I'm doing my own thing now." But it's hard for some people to do one thing. I'm still trying to do a lot of things that I probably shouldn't be doing. So that's a very good advice. Let's talk about the 80-20 rule. So first of
Yeah.
all, what is the definition of it? And second, before we started the interview, you mentioned something about the rule being now taught at Harvard. Am I correct? Or
Harvard Business
yeah,
Review published.
yeah.
So let me kind of tell you the story. So 80-20 says 20% of the people have 80% of the money, and the other 80% of the people have 20% of the money, which is true. It's like across all different countries and everything. And what it means is those that have 16 times more than the have-nots. Okay. Now, lots of people think that this is like just some injustice that capitalism has perpetrated on, these poor innocent people. It's like, no, this is a law of nature. And it doesn't even matter what kind of government you have. It's still going to be 80-20. It's not going to fix any of that. It's remarkably independent of all of that. In fact, the communist governments, actually it was like 1% of the people had 99% of the money, and the rest of them all went to gulags.
Yeah,
But that's a whole nother story. Okay, so I knew this like when I had the sales job, and I read this in a book, and then I printed out a sales report and I went through it. I was like, I'll be darned, it's true. Like, wow, that's interesting. And then I didn't really understand the meaning of it. Okay, now a few years later, I was reading this book by Richard Koch, and he says 80-20 has a lot to do with fractals and chaos. And then he just went on and he didn't talk about that anymore. And I was like, wait a minute, I know a whole bunch about that. And what you need to know about fractals and chaos is simply this: is that chaos theory is about patterns within patterns within patterns within patterns. Okay, so like if it's raining today and there's this little stream running through the corner of your front yard and it's winding around, or if you're in an airplane and you're flying over the Yangtze River in China, which is like the biggest river in Asia, it doesn't matter whether it's the little one or the great big one, they all have the same meandering curvature. Okay, that's fractal. Fractals are everywhere. It's like trees, branches and branches on branches on branches on branches. And I'm like, whoa, does that mean that there's an 80-20 inside every 80-20?
Ooh.
And then there's another one. Is that what that means? And I like run home and I get all these pieces of paper and I'm like, oh my word, this is true. And now this idea kind of has been like deeply buried and kind of floating around for 50 years, but nobody had ever really elaborated on it or taught it. I didn't find any good like math of how to deal with it. And I'm an engineer, so I started working on it. Well, I came up with this thing called the 80-20 curve. It got published in Harvard Business Review in Italy last year. And the 80-20 sales and marketing book has a companion website, 8020curve.com. And you can plug numbers in it. So for example, the 80-20 curve will tell you that if 1,000 people came into your coffee shop this week and they bought $5 lattes, one of those 1,000 people will buy a $2,700 espresso machine. It's almost like a law of physics.
Okay.
Okay. Now think about it. So we sold $5,000 of lattes and one $2,700 espresso machine. So now that's $7,700, not $5,000. Okay. Not to mention, you're also going to sell 10 $200 espresso machines. Okay, and then that gives you like another $2,000 or $3,000. So if you use 80/20, you'll sell $10,000 or $12,000 instead of $5,000, and it's literally going to be the difference between staying in business and going out of business. Like most businesses, what 80% of the customers actually buy only keeps the lights on, and the top 1%, that 1%, like the expensive stuff that 1% of the customer buys, is where all the profit and all the expansion and all of the opportunities is. And this is like a law of nature. And it doesn't just apply to coffee, it applies to your time. So it says that if you make, so 80, the 80/20 within the 80/20. So if you do the numbers, 2/3 of what you achieve comes from 5% of what you do.
Mm.
Half of what you achieve comes from 1% of what you do. Okay, if you're on straight commission, or you're a solo entrepreneur, or you're a freelancer, half the money you made last year, you got that money in 3 days.
Mm.
Okay, now what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, if you landed a really important client, what you did to get that client, you did in 3 days. Now you might have spent weeks and months, but 3 days of it is what moved the needle. And most of it didn't make any difference at all. It's like, and think about it. There was like one conversation with like the vice president of manufacturing, let's say, and you talked to that guy and he opened a door for you and everything went. And all the other, you talked to the software engineer, and you talked to the purchasing agent, you talked to the contracts person, and you talked to the graphic designer, and none of those conversations really accomplished much of anything. And then this one conversation, and this is how everything in the world is. It's incredibly unequal. Okay, so if this is your time, think of one day, 8-hour day, 480 minutes. Half of the money you made today came from 4.8 minutes. Okay, half the money you made today, you made in 5 minutes. It's true, I guarantee it's true. But when you're aware of it, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, yesterday, what was my most 5 valuable minutes? You might have to really think about it for a while. And then the day before, what was my most 5? You could go through your calendar and you're like, oh my goodness. And then you're like, I have huge blocks of time where clearly there's no way I'm making $1,000 an hour doing that. Right? I'm driving to the office supply store, or I'm mucking around with, I got this guy and he wants tech support. He buys one thing a year. He spends like $140, and he'll talk to you on the phone for 5 hours. Stop. Like, fire the customer. Be nice. It's fun. Dear Mr. Customer, we had a partner meeting and we're changing our business model and we have to let go of some of our accounts, and it's been really special working with you, but we just can't. Like, you should be doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And how does it, like, for somebody who, like you said, is a solopreneur, what is the fastest way to understand and where I should be focusing my attention when the little things, I still don't have anybody to do those, I still have to do them. So how do you optimize that time?
Okay, so the first thing is what you say no to. 80/20. 80/20 turns all of sales and marketing upside down. So 80/20 says sales and marketing is not a convincing people process. It is a disqualification process. 80/20 says you can be certain that 80% of the people that you started talking to are a complete waste of time. And your first job is to figure out who's a waste of time. And you get rid of those, and now you got 20% left. Well, think of how many less appointments you're going to have. Okay, so my friend John Paul Mendoza came up with the 5 Power Disqualifiers. And they are the 5 things that are always true anytime anybody ever gives you money. Okay? And here's what they are. Number 1, they have the money.
Yeah.
If they do not have the money, they are not giving it to you. I don't care if you sing Kumbaya. I don't care if you're, at their child's christening or anything else, okay? If they don't, now that sound as obvious as it sounds, when I was a failing sales guy, I would go spend all this time with all these people. They didn't have a budget for this. I didn't even have the guts to ask them if they had a budget. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. They have the money. Number 2, they have a bleeding neck. Okay, people who write checks are people with big problems, and they're in pain, and they want them solved. Okay? You go see a customer, and they're like, oh, we're doing just fine. We don't have any, I'm going on vacation next week, and well, let me get back to you maybe in August. Okay, if there's no urgency, they're not buying. Okay, bleeding. Okay, number 3. They buy into your unique selling proposition. Whatever it is your unique angle on things is, they buy into it. Well, first you have to have a unique selling proposition, which a lot of people don't. Like, well, I'm a graphic designer. So what? There's a million of those. Like, how about you're the world's best graphic designer for X-ray crystallography machines, right? Like 99.99% of the people in the world would never hire you, but like those companies, like you're the best, right? Okay. Number 4, they have the ability to say yes. There's lots of people you try to sell to, they could tell you no, and they could stop you, but they cannot give you a green light.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5, it fits their overall plans, which is pretty simple. But look, you write down all those 5 things, and then before you even attempt to sell anybody, so you're like, okay, hi, thank you for calling, and it's wonderful and everything. Before we go any further, I got some questions for you. And then you're like, and you as the salesperson, you're like, hey, I'm not going to give you any kind of sales pitch until we got. I don't want to waste your time. And what you're really saying is, you have to convince me that we could even go forward. Otherwise, I'm just not interested. It completely changes the dynamic, because they don't feel like you're selling them. They feel like they're trying to sell you.
Exactly.
And that's 80/20 sales and marketing, which is the title of my book.
Absolutely. I've had the problem where, it's not a problem, but there have been a few prospects where with that attitude, they think that you think that you're better than them or something. And then of course I don't want to work with somebody like that.
Right.
So at the same time, it's a good filter.
Well, so you say, hey, a couple of weeks ago, I spent 3.5 hours with this customer, and I found out we could have figured out I should be leaving in 5 minutes. And so I just have a set of questions that I always ask, and I really value your time, and I value my time. And is that okay? And you don't have to be mean and nasty or superior, but you need to communicate self-respect. And many times there's people who don't like people that have self-respect, and you don't want them as customers.
Nope.
You don't. They're terrible. They'll leech your energy. So you can get 80/20 sales and marketing if you go to sell8020.com. You can buy for $7, including shipping in the US, or $14 outside of the US. It's about a $10 discount compared to Amazon, and you get extra videos and tutorials
Awesome.
and bonuses that aren't available with the book. And it comes with the marketing DNA test, which we talked about at the beginning. And both the book and the marketing DNA test will change your life. I had a computer programmer named Joshua Earl. The marketing DNA test said you should be a copywriter, and 18 months later he broke the six-figure mark as a professional copywriter. So awesome. It's really possible.
Yeah. I'm going to be placing that link in the description for everybody watching or listening. Perry, what would be, before you go, what would be your final words of advice, encouragement for people who are struggling right now with their business, especially people who are just starting out and they're still not seeing any sales, they're ready to quit? Okay. What is your advice?
Okay. Let's say that 5 years from now, instead of struggling, you're making $500,000 a year and you're doing really well. I've seen this happen many times. Mm-hmm. Here's one thing I can promise you. You will be essentially the same person then as you are today. Okay. And the way you're going to make that money and the way you're going to be successful is by being the very, very, very best of what you already have. And the very best of what you already have is already evident. It's already on display. It's probably just a little camouflaged. And your number one job is to figure out, what do I really excel at that's uniquely me? And you figure out which people in the world are going to buy that.
That's it. Simple. Self-awareness.
Yes. So yeah, this has been great. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much, Perry, for your time. It was very valuable. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. And all the links are going to be in the description. Are you on social media, by the way? I couldn't find you on Instagram.
Oh, Twitter. I do have an Instagram. I don't remember what it is, but Facebook, Twitter, Perry Marshall. You'll find me there.
So. We'll find you. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Bye.